From the headquarters of Tell Us Your English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I am Soini Gray. A UN report has confirmed that the countries that signed the Paris Climate Agreement are far from fulfilling their commitments. In fact, the global climate is on track for an increase of 3 to 4 degrees Celsius. If those countries continue on their present course, an urgent transformation of the world economy is required to avoid global chaos. The report from the scientists of the IPCC says the use of fossil fuels need to be cut by 40% by 2030 in order to achieve the goal of limiting warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius.
Limiting global warming to 1.5 compared to 2 degrees would reduce the number of people exposed to climate-related risks and susceptible to poverty by up to several hundred millions by 2050.
Carbon dioxide emissions would need to decline substantially before 2030 to avoid warming of more than 1.5 degrees C in the middle of the 21st century, followed by large-scale carbon dioxide removal.
When talking about limiting the impact of global warming, various approaches have been emerged on how to reduce carbon dioxide emissions. Today we have the Professor of Environmental Studies at the University of Wisconsin-Madison in the United States, Gregory Nemeth, who will give us some insight into the emerging field of negative emission technologies, or ways to capture carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Hello, Gregory. Thank you so much for joining us. First of all, can you explain to us briefly what negative emission technologies are exactly?
Right. So when we talk about technologies to deal with climate change, we're normally talking about technologies that would reduce emissions, solar power, wind power, or biofuel. But one of the problems with having not made much progress in the last 30 years is that we're running out of time. And because CO2 and other atmosphere a long time, for decades, we probably will need to remove CO2 out of the atmosphere, reducing the amount we put into the atmosphere. So when we talk about negative emissions, we're talking about and taking it out and storing it around.
Hi, Gregory. You seem to be having some issues with that connection, and you seem to have broken up. I'm not sure if we sorted it, but I think I need you to... Okay, I just need you to repeat specifically the definition of negative emission technologies. We got part of it. I just need you to repeat that definition for me.
Right. The definition of negative emissions technologies are technologies that remove greenhouse gases from the atmosphere.
Okay, great. So what role can they play in climate change mitigation, especially in light of this IPCC report?
The IPCC report is that we haven't made enough progress in reducing emissions that go into the atmosphere, and it turn avoid the worst possible of climate change. We'll actually need to start removing CO2 from the atmosphere within the next 10 years or so.
Okay, Gregory, we're having a lot of problem with our connection, so I'm going to have to cut this interview short. We'll try and see if we can connect with you later on in the program, or maybe in another edition of From the South. More news now. Brazil's presidential election will be decided in a runoff. The far-right candidate, Bolsonaro, ended up in the first place, with the left-wing candidate, Fernando Haddad, in second. Bolsonaro needed to win 50% of votes plus 1 to win the presidency. He only managed to obtain 46% of the votes. Meanwhile, Haddad won 29% of the votes. Brazilians will head to the polls once again on October 28th to choose between the two candidates. As for the rest of the candidates, the center-left candidate, Ciro Gomes, remained in third place with 12% of the votes, and the right-wing candidate, Geraldo Alckmin and Enrique Marielles, won 4.7% and 1.2% respectively. Our correspondent in Brasilia, Adriana Sivorai, has more details.
Brazil will have runoff elections in a few weeks as no candidate won more than 50% of the votes. So now 2 of them will be on the ballot again on October 28. They are the far-right candidate Jair Bolsonaro of the Liberal Social Party, who said that if he wins the elections, he will further reduce the size of the public sector, and the left-wing candidate Fernando Haddad from the Workers' Party, who said his government will be inclusive for all. On Monday, Fernando Haddad will visit former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva in jail. He will then give a press conference. This is the current political panorama in Brazil.
The Sao Paulo Stock Exchange surged more than 6% in early trading. News of Bolsonaro's unexpectedly large lead in the first round was welcomed by the markets. The rise was led by shares in state-controlled companies, which the far-right candidate has promised to privatize. Brazil's currency, the real, also climbed against the dollar. These were Brazil's first presidential elections since the coup against Dilma Rousseff, and ultra-conservative forces took the center stage. Progressive resistance found a way to persevere.
Brazil went to the polls at a time of great political turmoil, under the rule of what many consider to be an illegitimate government, with the country's leading candidate imprisoned and under the risk of reviving a far right that endangers all. For more 29% of those who voted, the best option for democracy was Fernando Haddad.
I voted for Haddad because it represents the continuity of Lula da Silva's projects, social projects that will help our economy and will the poorest to study and eat.
The candidate of the Workers' Party, Fernando Haddad, voted in Moema and anticipated alliances he will make to face Jair Bolsonaro in the runoff.
It's a moment to lend a hand to each other, for all Brazilians, no matter what party we're from. We all have to contribute to the rebuilding of our country.
The pounding pots and pans was heard from balconies, a tradition of the Sao Paulo elite. It was answered from the ground by the Lances worker movement and others who accompanied Fernando Haddad to vote.
In Brazil, there are a lot of people pounding pots and pans, and it's because of a simple reason. Because tomorrow they won't be the ones cleaning them. It will be their housekeepers. The best president that Brazil has ever had is Lula. He had the courage to make a law so housekeepers would have labor rights. That didn't happen in Brazil in 500 years of bourgeoisie governments.
Political polarization was the main topic of the day. On the other side, Jair Bolsonaro obtained 46% of the votes.
For the runoff, the left wing must be united. That is fundamental. It's not enough to vote for the far-right candidate. It's necessary to vote for the left wing.
Militants from the Workers' Party celebrated the result in the Bankers' Union, and Fernando Haddad confirmed that on Monday he will begin the campaign for the runoff. His first activity will be visiting Lula da Silva in prison.
So let's go live to Rio de Janeiro and speak to João Ferreira. He's the director of the Political Science Institute at the State University there. João, thank you so much for joining us. How are you digesting last night's quite surprising results, and what do you think are the main takeaways from the elections? Hello, João. Are you hearing me? Okay. While there is a bit of a delay, he seems to have some trouble hearing me. So we're going to try him again. I'm going to repeat my question. Okay, so we're going to keep on trying to get João Ferreira because we need to speak to him about the elections. So we're going to take a short break now, and we'll have more news in a minute.
Telesur brings you special interviews with social and political personalities. Monday, from Washington. Tuesday, from Mexico. Wednesday, from Caracas. Thursday, from Quito. Friday, from Havana. Analysis about our continent's reality. Weekdays, only on Telesur. With developing events being presented through analysis. Our coverage transcends borders. With renowned journalist Walter Martinez.
Salud, amigos, tripulantes de nuestra querida, contaminada y única nave espacial.
Dossier. Weekdays. Only on Telesur.
Y ponga usted las cámaras, señor director.
Today marks the 51st anniversary of the assassination of the revolutionary leader Ernesto Che Guevara. Progressive leaders in Latin America have been commemorating this date. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro celebrated Che's legacy, saying on Twitter, "Che's conviction for the construction of a decent and equal world continues to inspire new generations who fight against the interventionist actions of the U.S. empire." And Bolivian President Evo Morales also celebrated Che via Twitter. Morales recorded that in 1967, Ernesto Che Guevara fought his last battle in Bolivia. He was captured and transferred to La Higuera, where he spent his last hours. "We commemorate and appreciate your fight. Hasta la victoria siempre." And our correspondent in Bolivia, Freddy Morales, has more on this special day.
On October 8, the region of Valle Grande remembers Ernesto Che Guevara and his comrades. Many people are marching to the community of La Higuera, where Che Guevara was detained and executed by a Bolivian military officer 51 years ago. The little school where Che Guevara spent his last hours has been turned into a museum. A group of Cuban doctors are currently working in the region, keeping Che's legacy alive by providing medical assistance to the poorest sectors. The Villa Grande region is holding several events in memory of Che Guevara. In the area where his remains were found, the local government inaugurated a cultural center. In the city of La Paz, 2 events are planned for today, one in the presidential palace and another in Plaza Murillo.
The authorities in Haiti have set up a makeshift hospital to help people injured in the earthquake that struck the country on Saturday. At least 14 people were killed and 150 injured in the 5.9 magnitude earthquake. Those most seriously hit were taken by air ambulance to the capital Port-au-Prince for treatment. A 5.2 magnitude aftershock was felt on Sunday, but did not create any more victims. Saturday's tremor is one of the strongest to hit Haiti since the 7.0 magnitude earthquake of 2010, which killed over 200,000 people. Heavy rainfall in Guatemala has affected 8 departments and caused the overflow of rivers, floods in isolated communities, and at least 1 disappearance. The National Coordinator for Disaster Relief has called on citizens to be alert and to take precautions. The authorities said that the low-pressure system located within the Atlantic Ocean has strengthened, with rain expected to increase in the next hours. Rescue units continue to search for an 11-year-old child who was dragged away by the Petacalpa River in San Marcos. Regional and municipal elections took place in Peru on Sunday. Nearly 13,000 authorities were elected from over 115,000 candidates. One of the largest developments of the day was the fact that Fujimoristo lost in almost every single race. Despite the fact that voting is mandatory, absenteeism reached nearly 20%. A festival in Mexico City over the weekend showcased traditional Mexican stories looking to promote local heritage.
For some people, it is only tradition. But for the organizers of this event, this festival means much more. They tried to rescue the history behind Mexican craftsmanship, music, and food.
Mexico has a lot of traditions and culture that must be carried on. That is why we decided to create this festival, to preserve our stories.
Epifanio Mendez says that he learned pottery when he was a kid. Now, at 86 years old, it is very important to him to teach his knowledge to new generations.
I feel very proud. I feel happy because our craftsmanship and the Zapoteca language are still alive.
Among Mexican traditions, music has a special meaning. Young people from the capital have even appropriated the cultural heritage of other regions in the country, like rhythm known as son guerrerense.
We found ourselves in this path. We liked it and we wanted to devote ourselves to it. For us, it represents joy, music, playing something that is being forgotten.
Almost no Mexican celebration is complete without confetti. The family makes party decorations for Christmas and Dia de los Muertos, the same way they were made generations ago.
We are very proud when people congratulate us, because we still make confetti by hand.
In a nation with 61 languages still being spoken, Mexican stories, craftsmanship, gastronomy, and music are intangible heritage, and they must be preserved.
We'll take a short break now. More news in a few.
An occasion to enjoy the cultural diversity that defines our South American essence. Come along to find out the story behind these personalities, traditions, and artistic expressions that unite us as a whole. Real Lives, Friday, only on Telesur. The ruling world order has always subjugated the masses. But who are the actors behind every move? What are their real interests? We analyze every move on Critical Move. Weekdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. Sunday was Brazil's elections, and the results were actually quite frankly shocking. So let's go back to Rio de Janeiro for our live interview with João Ferreira. He's the director of the Political Science Institute at the State University there. João, I just mentioned the results. Are you still digesting them? And what are some of the most important things that we need to understand about what happened with those results yesterday?
They're very hard to digest, as a matter of fact. But, you know, the result of the presidential run wasn't that surprising because, you know, there was an anticipation of the second round of the election. So the voters on the right all converged into Jair Bolsonaro, the extreme right candidate. Whereas on the left, you had a division between two candidates, Haddad from PT, the Workers' Party, and Ciro Gomes from PDT. So at the end, he scored 12%. So, in the second round, you're going to have a unified left against a unified extreme right, which is something quite surprising for Brazil. We never had a viable extreme right candidate in the elections over here. For the last 7 elections, the second round was disputed between a center-right party candidate from the Social Democratic Party and a Workers' Party candidate, PT. So this time is different. PT remained, but the center-right was replaced by the extreme right, which is, reason for concern, I think.
Now, João, how do you see the challenges for Fernando Haddad in the second round? Like, what does he need to do to turn this around?
Well, I think he has to conquer voters from, outside his party electorate constituency. So he has to appeal to the center, the old formula of capturing the center. He really has to go for it and to, start conversations, negotiations with political forces to the right of PT. Because, the forces to the left of PT are already voting for him, so they have no choice. So he has to actually try to save Brazilian democracy from its greatest threat, which is Bolsonaro, a candidate that, among other things, defends torture, defends, violence against women, gays, blacks, defends the return to military rule sometimes. It's everything that is very, threatening to democracy, he has in his agenda. So I think that Haddad has, a huge task in his hands.
Now, we see an even more conservative Congress than before, but with the PT still the largest group and even the far-left PSOL increasing its presence, what will this mean for the future president, whoever that is?
Well, it is true, PT is the largest party, but, Congress is a game of numbers, right? And comparing this Congress to the past ones, this one is much more conservative. And I think another reason for concern is the presence of the second largest party, which is Bolsonaro's party, made out of people who are very much focused on the agenda of security. They defend, arms for everybody, guns, for everybody as a solution for violence, for security, personal security. So it's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. If you add up, the elected representatives, you see this Congress is much more conservative, and I think that's what counts.
João, you just told us what Fernando Haddad will have to do to turn around voters, but what do you think will happen on the 28th of October? Who do you expect to win?
I hope that Haddad wins, but, I'm not sure he will manage to. I'm really rooting for him, and I think that Brazil should root too, but, it's very hard. It's very hard. Bolsonaro scored 46 points in the first round, so he has only 4 additional points to conquer in order to have a majority. And Haddad has to attract voters from different, profiles, different ideological places. It's a much harder task, but there's no choice.
Thank you so much for chatting with us, João Ferreira. We really appreciate your insight into this. And hopefully we'll be talking to you soon as the week progresses to the 28th and maybe on the 28th itself. Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure. Thank you. Other news now, the Spanish gynecologist Eduardo Villa has been acquitted by a court in Madrid in the famous stolen babies case. The doctor was found guilty of faking births and falsifying official documents. However, the 86-year-old couldn't be convicted because too much time has passed since he committed his crimes. He was the first person to go on trial due to the stealing babies case during the Franco dictatorship. Babies would have been taken from their mothers and given to infertile families. The Turkish government is seeking permission to search for the Saudi Arabia's consulate in Istanbul after a prominent Saudi journalist went missing there last week. The request was made after the foreign ministry summoned the Saudi ambassador for the second time over the disappearance of Jamal Khashoggi.
We demand his immediate release if alive. If not, we would like to know what exactly happened to him and the details of what happened. And we demand from the international community to pressure Saudi Arabia and Mohammed bin Salman to tell us exactly what happened inside that consulate.
The death toll from Indonesia's earthquake and tsunami has reached nearly 2,000. The authorities say that around 5,000 people are still missing, indicating that the death toll could still increase. In Palu, the worst-hit district, recovery operations have partially ceased. The 7.5 magnitude quake triggered a tsunami devastating the island of Sulawesi.
Evacuation is still ongoing. This morning we were informed of 4 more dead bodies. This number will keep rising, and the data is being recorded on an hourly basis.
And we've come to the end of this news brief. For these and many other stories, you can find them on our website at telesurtv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Sonia Gray. Thank you for watching.
The Pakistani journalist Tariq Ali examines the mass media influence promoted by imperialism. Get access to the analysis of the socio-economic and political life of the whole South America on our screen and platform in English. A critical place committed to the truth to determine the major events that transform the world today. Mondays, only on Telesur. Telesur brings you special interviews with social and political personalities. Monday, from Washington. Tuesday, from Mexico. Wednesday, from Caracas. Thursday, from Quito. Friday, from Havana. Analysis about our continent's reality. Weekdays, only on Telesur. Enjoy our programming from Monday to Friday, where you'll find the best information on culture, innovation, conservation, human well-being. Keep up to date on the latest innovations in science and technology with Atomun. The habits and knowledge you need to live a healthy lifestyle are on Guide Your Body. Environmental consciousness is required to preserve our Earth. Undergo your transformation on Green Zone. All about equity, diversity, and respect for identities on By Gender. Cultural manifestations, they are in all its forms and the stories of real lives. Every day we feature a wide variety of content. Only on Telesur, the news source from Latin America and the Caribbean.
Queremos verdad, reparación integral, pero sobre todo justicia, pero justicia social.
How many ways there are to tell a story? The different perspectives of our nations are on Telesur documentaries. Sundays, only on Telesur. In a world infested by inequalities, abuse of power, and injustice, the American journalist Abby Martin covers the struggle for fundamental rights worldwide, deep into the search of files which uncover the empire's strategies through our screen and web platform in English. The Empire Files with Abby Martin. Tuesday, only on Telesur.
You're watching Telesur English. I'm Sonia Gray, and these are the headlines at this hour. The far-right Brazilian candidate Jair has won the first round of the presidential results. The final winner will be decided in a runoff in 3 weeks. The runoff is required as no candidate has won a majority.
With these numbers, as I have said, we will go to a second round. There is no way we can announce the president with the results at this stage.
The Sao Paulo Stock Exchange surged more than 6% in early trading. News of Bolsonaro's unexpectedly large lead in the first round was welcomed by the markets. The rise was led by shares in state-controlled companies, which the far-right candidate has promised to privatize. Brazil's currency, the real, also climbed against the dollar. A UN report has confirmed that countries that signed the Paris Climate Agreement are far from fulfilling their commitments. In fact, the global climate is on track for an increase of 3 to 4 degrees Celsius if countries continue on their present course. The report from scientists of the IPCC says the use of fossil fuels needs to be cut by 40% by the year 2030.
You can see rocks.
Heavy rainfall in Guatemala has affected 8 departments and caused the overflow of rivers, floods in isolated communities, and at least 1 disappearance. The National Coordinator for Disaster Relief has called upon citizens to be alert and to take precautions. Rescue units continue to search for an 11-year-old child who was dragged away by the Patacalpa River in San Marcos. The authorities said that the low-pressure system located in the Atlantic Ocean has strengthened, with rain expected to increase in the next few hours. Spanish gynecologist Eduardo Villo has been acquitted by a court in Madrid in the famous stolen babies case. The doctor was found guilty of faking births and falsifying official documents during the Francisco Franco dictatorship. However, the 86-year-old couldn't be convicted because the statute of limitations had run out. He was the first person to go on trial due to the stolen babies controversy. The Turkish government is seeking permission to search Saudi Arabia's consulate in Istanbul. This after a prominent Saudi journalist went missing there last week. The request was made after Turkey's foreign ministry summoned the Saudi ambassador over the disappearance of the journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Those are the headlines at this hour. For these and more stories, go to our website at telestirtv.net/English.